I'll never really forgive them for that because there actually are lives on the line. There actually are in the criminal justice system. There are innocent people rotting away. There are people who have had their lives stolen from them by really bad public policies. And yes, many of those policies have disproportionately hurt Black people. But when you did this, you made the pathway to justice for those people at least 2 decades longer. Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Politics Podcast. I'm Hannah Cox. This is Brad Polumbo. This week, the scam of Black Lives Matter. Republicans cave on the debt deal. Do women need to be trained? And a follow-up on a crazy professor. We've got a great episode this week. We have to talk about Black Lives Matter, the organization, you guys. Now, for those of you who have not been keeping up since 2020, the organization has been under fire for quite some time. Let's roll this clip that discusses just a few of the controversies that have come their way.
Well, a report is out showing this. The Black Lives Matter organization is at risk of bankruptcy after its debt has reportedly climbed to nearly $9 million. That's according to tax returns obtained by the Washington Free Beacon. In its 2022 fiscal year, BLM organization raising just $9.3 million, an 88% decrease from the previous year.
The nonprofit continued to pay 7-figure salaries to close associates like former executive director Patrisse Cullors and her relatives, according to reports. Cullors was forced to resign last year after she was exposed for using millions of dollars in BLM funds on luxury home purchases in Los Angeles and Toronto.
So they've been getting called out for some time, especially by people in the Black community, activists within the criminal justice space. It seemed like they weren't really using their finances all that ethically for quite some time. But we just got a new report from the New York Post this week, and I want to cover some of the details that have been unveiled. Their headline says only 33% of Black Lives Matter's $90 million in donations have helped charitable foundations. And the Daily Mail covered this too, and they said just 33% of Black Lives Matter's accumulated donations of $90 million, which is just staggering, found its way to charitable causes. The group doled out around $30 million between 2020 and 2022, during which time it collected $90 million in donations as it promoted itself as the preeminent civil rights organization in the U.S. Among the benefactors of Black Lives Matter's paltry donations were friends and family of co-founder Patrisse Cullors, in particular, her graffiti artist brother Paul, who has received, wait for it, $1.7 million in salary and contracts during that time period. The total, that $30 million that they've doled out, that includes the about $4.5 million that the group gave out last year to nonprofits run by the movement's own supporters and friends, even as the organization itself registered losses of more than $8.5 million last year. Its latest public filings for the fiscal year 2021 show that Patrisse, while she resigned in 2021, is continuing to, basically her organization is still patting the pockets of her friend and family members. Last year, before she stepped down in 2021, there was another expose that revealed she had spent $3.2 million from the foundation on real estate. And they claimed that this was like for offices, but no, it was
That's
houses.
That's just her reparations, Hannah.
Those are some damn good reparations. I mean... and then lastly, the Post revealed Friday that she had a lucrative TV deal, reportedly worth millions of dollars, with Warner Brothers that ended quietly because she failed to produce any shows. So, Brad, I'll pause there. Are you surprised at the, I guess I would just call it blatant embezzlement going on here?
No, I'm not surprised. I guess the extent of it is a little shocking. So I just remember when the whole George Floyd thing happened in 2020, everybody was very concerned, and I think for good reason, about race and about policing and about what we can do to address this. But there was this conflation between the idea of Black Lives Matter, right? That we need to address injustices, that Black people's lives matter just as much as everyone else's, that a lot of people at least are sympathetic to in the abstract, with this actual specific organization, Black Lives Matter TM, the national organization, which, if you look, actually was a Marxist organization that explicitly vowed to try to abolish the nuclear family. And so that group, people didn't realize that was actually because just the broader sentiment and message a lot of people that agreed with it or said it don't support those things. But as just kind of part of all this, people were just cutting checks, like corporations were just cutting huge checks. People were donating to BLM, the official organization, and kind of not doing their due diligence. And this is what happens when you give extremist activists. It's also hilarious to me because they're literally Marxists. These women who co-founded it have talked about how they're Marxists, and yet they bought themselves multi-million-dollar houses. They padded the pockets of their friends and family. I guess, honestly, that tracks. But it's just fascinating because the headline is bad enough. Only 33% of their money went to donations to help charitable foundations. So what did the other 67% do? But then even that 33%, a good chunk of that is suspect spending to friends and families. It's like, I'm having a hard time imagining a charity that would look worse under the books than these guys do right now.
Yeah, you made a couple really good points there. So not only did they only give out about 33% of the money they brought in, which, guys, $90 million for an organization, for a nonprofit to raise, that is unheard of. That is a staggering amount of money. And these people were literally telling us that the civil rights crisis was so bad in America that it was as deadly, if not more than COVID, that we could break all these public health laws because it was so pressing. Lives were on the line. We needed to get out in the streets and risk mass death in order to fix this problem. And yet they only handed out 33% of the money they raised to other causes. But not only did they only hand out 33% of it, 4.5 million of that was given out to friends and family members of the organization. And it was given to other organizations they ran. But not only is that fishy and suspect because of the relationship there, some of these organizations themselves are super sus. So one of their biggest grants was for $1.2 million plus last year, and it went to the Love Not Blood campaign, which was set up by a man named Cephas, known as Uncle Bobby X Johnson, in memory of his nephew Oscar Grant, who was a black drug dealer that was gunned down by a white transit cop in Oakland in 2009. I don't remember this case whatsoever, but Johnson was apparently a longtime activist, and he was a member of Black Lives Matter, and he worked closely with Colors of the years, and the death of his nephew actually inspired a film called Fruitvale Station. Again, I don't know anything about it, but Johnson said he started the charity in 2010, but he didn't actually apply for charitable status from the IRS until 2019. Records show that in 2020, Love Not Blood recorded receiving less than $50,000 in contributions. So this was not really an operation in any meaningful capacity until he got over $1 million handed to him from Black Lives Matter. That is just
very sus.
It's very sus. It makes a mockery of the idea that there are these pressing issues they needed to raise.
We founded a nonprofit, and the first thing we did, it was start working on applying to the IRS.
Immediately. You're not
it
actually
takes a while to get approved, but we started applying. That was what we worked on from the get-go.
Yeah, that was our step number one, was apply to the IRS, hire somebody to help us apply to the IRS, because it's complicated. But yeah, and again, it's not that they're just sitting on these funds either, which would be bad enough. That still would undermine the notion that this is such a pressing problem. We need to get all this money and resources out there. No. They've spent them on other things because they are becoming insolvent. They are in the red. They are in debt. God. So what blows my mind, though, is thus far, they don't seem to be facing any legal consequences for this, which I am not an accountant. I don't profess to be an expert on tax law, but I would think that if you are a nonprofit that is saying you're raising money for certain causes, and then you're not using that money towards certain causes, and you're actually using it to buy yourself homes and pay you and your family's lucrative salaries, is that not fraud?
It sounds like a crime. We're not lawyers, but that has to sound like you're doing a crime. I'm sorry.
For us, we have to be so careful in what we say as a nonprofit to make sure that we don't break any laws around what's known as electioneering or weighing in on candidates or elections. And we're very, very careful about any legal parameters we have to think about. So to me, it's sort of amazing that you could have this kind of behavior going on and the IRS isn't looking into this. And that just, I think, continues to make the IRS itself a very sus agency, because depending on who's president at the moment, who's in charge, they tend to be very political in their nature of how they enforce their laws and who they give, who they even let become a nonprofit. It's weird.
Yeah, I guess it's just not. It's also surprising to me because you'd think that if you got this huge influx of money and Black Lives Matter was just so prominent, and they were projected to this status in our society, and instantly they were like the famous group and everything. You'd think that you would anticipate scrutiny with that, and you get some people who know how to run stuff, and you dot your I's and cross your T's, right? Because you know that you're divisive, you know you're controversial, you know there's people going to be looking into you and trying to find something they can use against you, and yet you still just did this stuff and expected what? That nobody was going to notice? Really?
I mean, even victims' mothers, like Tamir Rice, his mother, who was a 12-year-old boy that was killed by police in a park while he was playing, I think back in 2012, I want to say. People like this have been speaking out against Black Lives Matter for some time. They're like, they come to our cities, they have these rallies, they like campaign and raise money on our dead family members' names, but they don't talk to us, they don't communicate, they don't involve us, and they often don't even give us money. Now, they did end up giving Tamir Rice's mother's foundation a grant later on, I noticed, but she's been very critical of them in the past. And I know many other families have been pretty upset with them. People within the Black community have had some criticism. I think it's, as Marxists, they did exactly what Marxists always do, right? They promise the world, they say they have these higher goals, but really they just want to enrich themselves off other people and not actually work. I have worked for organizations and foundations that have had far fewer resources than this. I mean, the criminal justice reform organization that I operated a couple of years ago had, a couple $100,000 at our disposal per year. And we overturned the death penalty in a state every year I was in that role. So you don't have to have a mass amount of money to make a difference if you're smart. I don't know of one law or one policy change that Black Lives Matter has been behind. And I think as a whole, actually, most of what they've done has undermined the criminal justice reform movement and actually created a great deal of backlash towards it. Because up until 2020, we were, moving leaps and bounds on criminal justice reform. There was consensus on it. Republicans had been leading the way at the state level on these issues for over a decade. People were really getting behind bail reform and getting rid of mandatory minimums and getting rid of drug laws and like getting rid of the death penalty. I mean, we just had so many good things that were happening. Even conservatives were starting to look at like policing reforms, smarter ways of doing policing. And then you had these idiots run around in 2020 screaming, defund the police and burning to the ground. And it created inevitable backlash. And I'll never really forgive them for that, because there actually are lives on the line. There actually are in the criminal justice system. There are innocent people rotting away. There are people who have had their lives stolen from them by really bad public policies. And yes, many of those policies have disproportionately hurt Black people. But when you did this, you made the pathway to justice for those people at least 2 decades longer. I mean, it's collapsed. It's really, even within the GOP, like, I don't think criminal justice reform is something that you see people talking about these days, because it's become something you don't really want to touch, certainly not policing reform. And it's just ghastly.
Yeah, I just remember in 2020, after the death of George Floyd, there was this moment where everybody thought it was horrible. Everybody started talking about solutions. And then all of a sudden, it got super divisive. People started rioting and burning down buildings. And the progress was halted in its tracks, and nothing actually came out of it. In what was the best opportunity for substantive reform at the federal level, nothing came out of it. And I think groups like Black Lives Matter, the official group, and these other activists who really pushed fringe ideological messages and exploited this for their own self-interest, I think they have a large share of the blame for that nothing actually came out of the George Floyd era, when everyone was understandably concerned about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I can't remember who said it. You probably know, but it's the worst thing that can happen to a movement is to have bad messengers. And I think that's exactly what encapsulates Black Lives Matter. It's something that had a very compelling message. They were very smart in their marketing, but man, were they stupid when it came to public policy, and were they unethical when it came to managing their resources. And I think this should be a really sobering lesson for people who jump on bandwagons for organizations like this and just kind of like go along with the trend and what feels good. Is you need to use your head. And I really do think if you don't understand public policy, stay out of it. Stay out of it, because you're going to end up actually undermining causes that are making headway with people and real activists on the ground who have taken the time to understand the issues, to understand the legal framework, to understand the messages that are compelling to lawmakers. So like, just get out of the way. If you're not going to do the real heavy lifting work of understanding public policy, stay all the way out, because you, as somebody who has been on the ground, you get in our way. And I'm fed up with people like this. All right, move us along. I'm too heated. Hey guys, Hannah here. Big things are happening at Base Politics, and we want to make sure you stay in the loop with all of our productions and developments. If you like the Base Politics podcast, you can find it every Wednesday morning on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Brad's YouTube. You want to support the show? Be sure to join the Base Politics Locals channel, where you can help produce it for only $5 a month. You can also catch our new shows, Propaganda and Damage Control, every Saturday on our respective YouTubes and Facebook channels. On Damage Control, Brad teams up with right-of-center LGBT guests to restore sanity to the increasingly unhinged debate over these issues. And on Propaganda, I'm taking video footage of police behaving badly every week and using those videos to expose problems within U.S. policing and the laws that guide it. Remember, Base Politics is a nonprofit organization dedicated to moving the culture through content. If you want to be a part of these efforts, you can donate to fund our work at base-politics.com.
All right. Well, speaking of the mismanagement of money, we need to talk about the debt deal that House Republicans just reached with President Biden. Folks might remember we've discussed this recently, but there was this looming deadline. It's estimated right now about June 5th, where the U.S. will default on its debt unless Congress passes legislation to raise the debt ceiling. They've been at a deadlock. House Republicans had a list of things they were demanding. They passed a bill to do this. It had some, multi-trillion-dollar reductions in spending, nowhere near to a balanced budget, but that's been rejected. They've come to something of a compromise, and we now have details on that deal. But first, here's Kevin McCarthy announcing the fact they've made their breakthrough in negotiations.
We finally were able to cut spending. We're the first Congress to vote for cutting spending year over year. So you cut that back, you fully fund the veterans, you fully fund defense, but you take that non-defense spending all the way back lower than 22 levels. Now you get work requirements for TANF and SNAP, where the Democrats said that was a red line. Now you're able to reform NEPA. How frustrating we are. It's been 40 years since you could streamline it. To build a road in America takes you 7 years of review. We now limit that where it's focused, where you can only review it for 1 to 2 years. We're going to get America working again. We get the process working again, where we always have these omnibuses at the end of the year. We now penalize the Congress if they don't get their jobs done. There is so much in this that's positive, and measure it to all the other debt ceilings.
So here are the specifics of what's in the deal as reported by Axios. So on spending, the non-defense discretionary spending would be kept roughly flat in 2024, and then it's limited to a 1% increase in 2025 with no caps after that. It also has some very minor increases to work requirements for food stamps, no changes to work requirements in Medicaid. It has a big increase in defense spending and a big increase in veterans spending. It has permitting reform to streamline the environmental review process to speed up approval for new energy projects, and I believe specific assistance for a project Joe Manchin wants in West Virginia. COVID aid, it claws back $29 billion in unspent COVID money. And IRS funding, it rescinds $1.9 billion of the $70 billion in funding for new Internal Revenue Service agents that was given in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. One other thing it does that I actually really like is it forcibly ends the pause on student loan payments, taking away the Biden administration's ability to extend it again. And we're now, I think, almost 3 years with nobody having to pay their student loans, which costs taxpayers billions every month and actually mostly benefits doctors and lawyers financially. So I'm glad to see that come to an end. Basically, this does almost nothing to reduce spending. It's a complete capitulation on that front. Has a few small good policies in there, I will say. I like clawing back the COVID aid. I appreciate the permitting reform. I think that's really important. The student loan stuff. But I think they basically have completely capitulated on spending. For me, it's very important to avoid the default. But I think they really shouldn't have caved on spending like this. I mean, it's barely even a speed bump in taking us off the financial cliff. They're increasing military even more, increasing veteran spending, and then some of it is flat and then allowed to increase 1%. That is not even a cut of any kind, really. I mean,
If progressivism is the train that is heading off the fiscal track, and conservatism is the brakes on that train, then we need to get the brakes changed because they're out. Like, this is embarrassing. What is even the point of Republicans to deliver this kind of thing? I thought Rand Paul said it best. He said, fake conservatives agree to fake spending cuts. Deal will increase mandatory spending 5%, increase military spending 3%, and maintain current non-military discretionary spending at post-COVID levels. No real cuts to see here. Conservatives have been sold out once again. It's inarguable to me. Like, I fundamentally don't feel like we have an actual second party at this point in the country. I don't understand what the point of them is, what they ever deliver on. They're just constantly a disappointment. I don't know. I'm just so fed up. And, you see a few lone voices speaking out. Rand, of course, always being great. Chip Roy has spoken out. And honestly, it just seems like there's very few Republicans. I mean, Republicans not only had the negotiating power against the Democrats, they also have Kevin McCarthy, right? I mean, they have it in his deal to be House Speaker that they can basically vote him out at any time. And so to me, the fact that they have all this negotiating power and they come up with this, it's ridiculous.
Well,
and
I guess let me push back on you just a little in that they don't have that much negotiating power. They have one branch with a very slim majority. And the Democrats have the Senate, the Democrats have the White House, and they just won't support any cuts to spending, really.
Because they know Republicans are going to fold. They have to care more about defaulting than Republicans do. So if we default, they're going to get the blame. So ultimately, they have to play ball. Even though Republicans have this one bargaining chip, it's a good one. They can hold them hostage, and they should be able to get a lot more holding their feet to the fire than this. I don't feel like they were even trying.
So it sounds my read on it is that in the negotiations, they prioritize these niche policy things over actual spending cuts. And I think that's a mistake. I think they should have held the line. The bill that House Republicans passed, it would have trimmed off $5 trillion from deficits over the next decade or something like that. But it still would have added trillions and more deficits. I think they could have at least held out for something like that, right? They wanted to go back to fiscal, I think 2022 levels or something.
Yeah.
Maybe they should have drawn a line in the sand and just said, we're holding out for pre-pandemic spending levels on everything. And part of the problem with Republicans' position here is that they want more military spending and more veteran spending.
Which is crazy.
They can't actually push and negotiate for harsh spending cuts on everything else while also wanting more of that. Because they're inconsistent, it weakens their negotiating stance. Yeah. I would say put it all back to 2019. That's still a crap ton of money. That's still also nowhere near a balanced budget.
Republicans need to have a come to Jesus on this. We spend a crazy amount on military spending. It makes absolutely no sense. And until we're really ready to confront that, I think everything else is just hot air because it is such a significant portion of our budget. There is so much waste, fraud, and abuse. We don't even know how much waste, fraud, and abuse there is because the Pentagon can't complete an audit. And yet you idiots want to keep giving them more and more money to virtue signal to your base. You are frauds.
It's disappointing. I guess what I will say for them is this. Oftentimes the debt ceiling just gets blanket reauthorized with literally no changes, just what they call a clean reauthorization. That's what they did 3 times under President Trump. This is better than that because they get things that are good, clawing back the COVID aid, the permitting reform, the student loan, the work requirements. But it's even a 1% cap on 2025 increased spending is probably less than they would otherwise have increased it. So if I'm grasping at straws, I can find some positive things they've achieved here compared to what they've done in the past, which is just blanket reauthorize the credit card with no changes. But it's still, I think, a really sad state of affairs that this is where we're at.
I agree.
Hey guys, Brad here. I just want to make sure you're staying in the loop on all things face politics. We've also got 2 new shows you should check out. One is my new show, Damage Control, where I'm teaming up with right-of-center LGBT guests to restore sanity on these increasingly unhinged issues. Then there's Hannah's show Propaganda, where she's reacting to videos of police brutality and exposing the systemic flaws in the U.S. criminal justice system. Check these all out on our individual Facebook and YouTube pages. And remember, Base Politics is a nonprofit organization, so you can help us move the culture through content by going to base-politics.com and donating today. All right, let's move on to our quick hit segment. And up first, we have one of my new favorites, a congressman named Maxwell Frost, an ultra-progressive Democrat, who has recently come out and said that if you don't support a taxpayer bailout for student loans, you're basically a segregationist or similar to somebody who opposes women's right to vote. Take a listen to this heck of a clip.
I want to say something. My Republican colleagues are pushing a narrative that student debt relief is unfair. And to my colleagues, I agree with you. I agree that what's going on is unfair. Folks who paid off their debt, the fact that they had to have it in the first place is unfair. The fact that students still have to take out crushing student debt just to get a college education, that is unfair. And if we legislated using the logic that you bring to this issue here today, women and black folks wouldn't have the right to vote because it would be unfair to those who never got to vote before them. See, if we legislated using your logic, that because there was an injustice, we can't fix it because it's unfair to those who never had it fixed, means we would never progress on any issue in this country. Why do you bring that bigoted logic to this issue as it relates to students, but not any other issue?
So for me, this is just 101 out of the playbook. What do you do when basic facts, economic realities, and basic fairness aren't on your side? You just accuse your opponents of being racist, sexist, and using bigoted logic. Give me a break.
Brad, he was flying through the air so fast with his mental gymnastics, doing so many twists and turns that I couldn't even see him. It was like a streak of just lightning just going across my screen. Like I've never seen those kind of aerobics on screen. That was impressive. What did I just hear? I mean, yes, you're right. Like, of course, that's their playbook when they can't actually win an argument. It's racism, sexism, blah, blah, blah. But he actually thinks he did something there. Like, he thought that was a mic drop. And I just fundamentally think we have got to get logic courses back into education. I mean, people have got to be taught how to think. That was astounding in the level of stupidity and just
it really is.
We're not there.
An apples to orange comparison, because what you're comparing is a policy that takes from one group and gives to another, to situations where we were giving equal treatment to all. Those aren't the same thing. They're not even close to the same thing. In student debt relief, you have working class taxpayers forced to fund the bills of other more affluent on average taxpayers. Redistribution, taking from one group to give to another. Nobody's vote was taken away from some people to give black people the right to vote. No, they were given the same rights as everyone else. Same with women. It was about equality, not about taking away from one and giving to another. It's just such a ignorant and ill-fitting comparison. I also just reject the notion that student debt is an injustice in and of itself. College is way too expensive for reasons we can discuss, but a lot of them are because of the government and intervening and messing it up. But the average bachelor's degree earns somebody $1.2 million more over their lifetime. And the median monthly student loan payment is $287. Most borrowers actually have quite manageable amounts of student loan debt. The whole crisis narrative is incredibly overwrought. And I don't think it's an injustice to ask people to pay their own bills on an investment that will earn them over $1 million more over their lifetime. I am failing to see the injustice. To me, what would be an injustice would be forcing working class taxpayers to pay off the student loans of affluent college graduates. That would be the injustice.
Yeah, and I also, I think college is way too expensive. I have an entire old episode of Base breaking down exactly how it became so expensive. If people want to check it out, I did the research. But it's not it's not impossible to find affordable colleges right now, right? Like there are a lot of things you can do to make college pretty affordable. One, there's a crap ton of scholarships that you can get out there if you even halfway try. Two, you can go to community colleges, you can go to state colleges where you can be in many states in the South. I know the lottery actually gives like scholarships for public school kids, like if or anybody in high school. If you get a certain GPA, you get lottery money that helps you subsidize in-state schools. You can live at home. Like there are so many things you can do to get a cheap college degree. I don't have any sympathy for people who are crazy, who take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans for degrees that will never reimburse them for that, who go to private schools. Like I went to a private school, wouldn't do it in hindsight, but I did have parents who were able to help me with that. And I therefore did not come out with a ton of debt. But I knew other people who went to Belmont which Belmont, by the way, is like $45,000 a year plus cost of living. So it's a very expensive school to go to. I graduated with a lot of people who thought like this of like, well, now I have, $200,000 in student loan debt for a music degree and I can't like pay it back. And that's not fair. It's like, why did you go to Belmont then? You didn't have to go to Belmont. You didn't have to pick this degree. Like nobody forced you to do those things. It's not an injustice, right? Like sometimes bad things happen to you because you're stupid and you make bad choices and you have to be accountable for that and take some self-responsibility. It is still up to you to figure out what makes sense for you financially, what is going to actually be a good investment. And we wouldn't make this comparison for virtually any other kind of debt. We wouldn't say like, oh, you went and bought a Mercedes and it's just so unjust because you didn't realize that it was going to be more expensive than a Honda. And, therefore the person who's paying for their Honda should have to subsidize your Mercedes. Like it just, none of it actually makes any logical sense whatsoever. And they look to me just like complete elitist, because if you actually truly think this, I think you are so far removed from the problems of real people and real injustice that you look like a clown.
I'm not even sure if they actually do believe it. I think it's part and parcel of a larger pattern we've seen with progressives trying to shut down debates. A bunch of progressive members of Congress, including Cori Bush and Ayanna Pressley, have labeled policy views they disagree with policy violence, which is a very Orwellian term, essentially saying that your disagreement with them is violence, which of course is the necessary precursor to them being able to justify shutting down your speech if your speech is violence, or even using violence against it in self-defense. And so I think this Maxwell Frost, he is one of those people. He's a squad member at least in vibes. And I think what we're seeing here is a cheap attempt to try to shut down a debate. They know they cannot win on the merits, so they're just going to call everyone racist and sexist who disagrees with them. And that's part of why people increasingly don't take those labels as seriously, because they've called everybody all the things forever. And that's unfortunate because it weakens our ability to actually recognize those things where they do still exist. But it's because of people like Maxwell Frost who throw around accusations of bigotry like candy on Halloween instead of making serious or substantive arguments. So I think it's a real shame and not befitting a member of Congress.
No, not at all. Well, speaking of clowns, we have to turn our attention to another one that I found online. Brad, I am so fed up as a woman with the fringy far-right male trad ideology. And it's something that I don't even know how it gets in my algorithm when I talk about this with normies, like even like pretty conservative normies like my parents. They're like, those kinds of people don't exist. We've never heard people say things like this. And I'm like, oh my God. They're like on the internet though. And they are meeting up online and forming little communities.
The red pill community.
Cheese and rice. Like these people are absolutely cracked and they have very misogynistic views. And I just have to like go in for a minute. So hang with me here. Over the weekend, I saw this guy named Joey Manarino, who apparently is some like wannabe right-wing influencer. I don't know, never heard of him. But he tweeted, most women under 30 today have been raised to do nothing in the house. They are unable to cook, clean, or properly care for a man. They are unable to do laundry without shrinking the clothes. They don't understand you're supposed to wake up before the man does so you can prepare coffee, etc. Someone would do well to create a how-to course on YouTube teaching the basics of womanhood to the younger generation that clearly hasn't been housebroken.
Housebroken? What?
Housebroken. And I'm not saying this is all women, so if it don't apply, let it fly. Now, he got castrated online for this, as he should have, and so he put out a follow-up tweet saying, Since some seem to think that this is controversial, it goes without saying that the man should be paying for the large majority, if not all, of the woman's needs. But if a man is doing that and receiving nothing in return, what is his motivation to continue doing so? Zero. This is common sense.
Hey.
I'll give you first bat. You can go to bat first because I'm going to crack this sucker.
Let me just say that I think there are real problems with men and women and gender issues right now and romantic issues. But when you find yourself describing human beings as not having been housebroken, stop, delete your account, touch grass, and maybe come back when you're back in touch with reality, because women are not cats. Women are not dogs. They are not pets. They don't need to be housebroken. They're your equal partners in a relationship. You should navigate responsibilities and chores and everything as partners. It's just a very, very saddening view of relationships and women.
The problem with trads online, and I want to make a separation because I grew up as trad as they come. I didn't know a single person that was divorced. I didn't know a single woman that worked. Everybody I knew was homeschooled. Everybody I knew was deeply religious. I grew up in actual tradville. Nobody thought or acted like this. The problem with the online trad community is that they want to take some elements of what the Bible says about Christian marriages without the Christianity behind it. And they don't understand some of the fundamental teachings that they're running their mouths about online. So in the Bible, it does give some instructions that like men should be the spiritual leaders in their home. And that means that they should be covering their family in prayer, that they should be looking out for their emotional well-being, that they should be their protector, both physically, but also mentally and spiritually, and ensure that their family is following God and like staying on the right path. It does not mean only men work and women stay home and clean up after them. There's also a passage in Proverbs that speaks about like the Proverbs woman, and it says some things about like the woman like waking up early and taking care of her household, but it's meant as a way to honor this woman because she loves her husband and she willingly wants to do this because he's, so good to her and she's pouring back into him. And that's a biblical Christian marriage, is where you are actually equal in how you treat one another and how you care for one another, and you each bring different things to the table and how you provide, but like you have this really beautiful, whole piece that you create. That's not how the tradcons online approach this. They approach it as like, I want somebody who I can boss around, who's submissive, who makes me feel smart, who doesn't talk back, who waits on me. They want a servant is what they want. And what's ironic to me is like not a one of them can even probably provide for their wife not to work, much less like actually afford the all the duties. Like if they wanted to go hire all the things that a wife would do for them, from having your kids to babysitting your kids to cleaning to cooking, like I mean, run the numbers. I've seen people do it on TikTok. Like it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And I'm pretty sure none of these men are making anywhere close to that. In fact, I'd like to point out that the median income for a man in the United States is only $50,391. That is not anything that you're going to be able to use for, to run a whole household, much less to afford all these services that you think a wife should be bringing to the table. I think these people look like absolute clowns. It's no wonder there's so many incels, because no woman would put up with this. Women can make their own money. They don't need you. If you're not bringing more to the table, like why should they put up with this kind of attitude? And on top of all of that, I've dated many men and I've dated some lovely men, but I have not met a one that is better at cleaning up their house, that is better at running their lives than women that I know. I'm sorry, I've yet to see it. If anybody needs to be housebroken, it's often the men who don't have the basic abilities to clean up after themselves. And this is why you see that a lot of women are the ones that file for divorce, and they'll go to TikTok and they'll talk about it. And they're like, I have more free time. I have less responsibility as a single mom than I did in my marriage, because I was basically having to clean up after an adult, manage his life, and run the show. And it was like having another kid, and I'd rather like just raise my kids on my own. That's the actual reality out there in the world right now. So these people don't have a clue. And I'm just so sick of this narrative and of people acting like there's any kind of Christian element to it. Absolutely not. That has nothing to do with that. These are gross men who need therapy, and women, just be thankful you have the internet, because they are willingly outing themselves out there and saying that this is who they are so that we can all avoid them. Make a Facebook group, post their pictures and names, and let's just leave them to themselves.
Well, Hannah, tell us how you really feel.
I struggle with that.
All right, so now we have to do a quick follow-up on the story we covered last week, which folks might remember, the crazy, New York college professor who harassed those pro-life students and, flipped their table or their materials that were on their table and was accusing them of violence for their opinions and said they were triggering her students. And we discussed how crazy it was that a professor like that would, be so anti-free speech and against open debate and the kind of things we should be teaching our college students to value. Well, shortly after we recorded, the story got a whole lot crazier. So some reporters from the New York Post went to her apartment and knocked on her door and asked her, about the story. And Shellyan Rodriguez actually came out and held a knife up to a reporter's throat. There's very
Not just
disturbing.
Not just a knife, a machete.
A machete, yes.
A machete, yes.
And then chased them out to the car and tried to kick them and kick the car and screamed at them and just had this crazy meltdown. Yeah, so this woman was arrested and charged. She was fired from the university, which, look, we're not into cancel culture, but this isn't an offensive tweet. You held a knife to a reporter's throat. What a wackadoodle. I mean, yikes, Hannah.
I mean, it amazes me that these people largely function in society beneath the radar until they crack. I mean, what adult is physically hitting somebody? It's so trash. And I'm from Alabama. I don't know people who act like that. I don't understand. I don't follow at all. This is just completely beyond the pale. And the fact that this person was teaching students for who knows how long, terrifying. I mean, emotional regulation is a very lacking skill for many people in this country. And it's really phenomenal to me that you could be so coddled and so stunted in your intellectual growth that you could end up being an adult who behaves like this. I mean, from beginning to end, right? Like throwing papers off the table. Like I said last week, she's accusing them of being violent while also kind of being violent herself.
Yeah.
But then she takes it even further and actually does become truly violent. I mean, I guess it was predictable in many ways, but good grief. And especially when there's somebody filming you, that's what is actually beyond even more amazing to me. Is you're on camera this whole time and you know it, and you're still assaulting people and going
crazy.
So, I think you need padded walls, honestly, institutionalization. I've said it for a while. I think we need to bring it back. I mean, it's my controversial take, I know, but I've yet to been dissuaded of it. I think that increasingly I'm more and more convinced that, yeah, some people really should not just be out walking around society. They're a danger to themselves and others.
I mean, this person has been teaching young minds at Hunter College since 2017. I'm just deeply disturbed. Self-described Black Marxist. Yikes. Absolutely cracked. Good on the university for actually firing them. I'm glad there are some still basement level standards. I bet the university wouldn't have fired. The university probably should have fired them over flipping out on those students.
Yeah.
I wonder if they would have, though. It's almost a shame that it went down like this because the whole knife thing kind of just at that
machete.
Point. The machete.
Who has a machete? Who just has a machete sitting around?
Also, if reporters come to your apartment, that would be unpleasant, but you have every ability to just close the door and say, go away. And if they don't go away, call the police. But you don't have to chase them
with a machete,
assault them.
I can't get past it. I don't know. That is just, I have so many questions about the entire situation. But yeah, I went to Hunter College. I'd want a refund first and foremost because this is crazy. But I am curious if the school actually would have acted to fire her over the initial incident. I feel probably no. They probably would have put her on, given her a warning, put her on supervision or something for a few months, and then it would have just quietly gone away. And I don't know. I hate to use blanket statements, but in racking my mind, I think I can name maybe 2 or 3 people I've met who are Marxists that were sane. Most of these people are just, it's a red flag for many, many reasons, but it really is an indication of mental instability, I think, most of the time.
I don't know. All
right. Let's go to the mailbag.
Okay, Emma says, good episode. My friend is a 911 dispatcher and she tells me stories of crazy people calling in to tattle over the smallest infractions. An example, running red lights. I think people that do things like that are just trying to feel important or maybe validate their own existence. Either way, it's very cringy, and dispatch usually won't send officers for stupid stuff. Yeah, I mean, that's good. They should do that far less.
How would you even catch somebody who ran a red light? Like, what? I bet, I never thought about this till this very moment, but I bet 911 dispatch centers are fascinating places. Like, maybe we
Yeah.
need a reality show there. Okay, Rachel Murphy said, major respect for your hot take, Brad. I'm a mother and I've seen some utterly awful parents out there myself working in clinical research. It kills me to see parents neglecting these poor children or treating them terribly. While I'm very sad about you and Hannah not planning to shape any young minds yourself, Lord knows we could use some more base parents out there. I wholeheartedly respect that you understand how precious that responsibility is and would not undertake it if you could not provide your best to a child. Now, I don't think Brad intends to not have kids. I think you want kids, right, Brad?
Yeah, maybe I let that on by accident. I do. No, I do. I'm probably not for a little while, but I do. But I know you don't.
But but I hear this sentiment a lot, and I get it. I've had so many people be like, "But you're the kind of person that should have kids." Like I think I've mentioned before, I had some family friends be like, "We'll pay to freeze your eggs so that you can do it later in life. Like you should." And I'm like, "Thank you so much. That's very generous." But I don't want to have a child, and I agree. Like we need more good parents out there, but I also would say the fact that you do see more educated women tending to have fewer kids or not have kids, I think speaks to something that we need to grapple with in society, which is that we've made a lot of gains under feminism as far as equality goes and having equal laws and ability to succeed in the workplace. Now we need to do some real work in the culture and in romantic relationships to ensure that we have a structure where women can be supported in having kids and not continue to have to do the bulk of the labor, both physical but also like the child rearing, the emotional labor, like the caretaking. I think we've got a long way to go from what I've heard from most moms who've had kids, as far as like actually getting to a place where they have the support they need from their partners to still be full autonomous humans pursuing their goals and their dreams and their passions and working if that's what they choose, while also having kids. I think men have been more enabled in that capacity. So I'll just throw that out there as food for thought.
So Steve says the North Carolina governor declared an unofficial state of emergency in order to get people's attention, to warn them about how much the Republican bill will hurt public schools in North Carolina. He does not receive any dictatorial or special powers. It doesn't mean anything legally. It's just an attention grabber. Brad Polumbo is a fascist liar. So I was speaking broadly when I said that emergency declarations often unlock special powers or the ability to spend money. I don't know what the specifics are in North Carolina, but I will say, again, a bill democratically passed by your legislature, and you're pulling out everything you can do to stop it, you are not on the side of democracy. And all school choice does is give parents options. It doesn't mean anything bad for public schools unless public schools are failing to meet the students' needs. So you can call me a fascist liar if you like. I don't think that's accurate. But
actually, you very specifically said that you weren't sure exactly what this entailed, but that typically emergency powers, and that's true. And I don't know that this commenter is correct. We've not looked into it. I don't know what the declaration did, but I will say this: if it did nothing and it was just symbolic, that's kind of even worse, because he's a fraud and he's just trying to be like a boy who cried wolf and raise an alarm and actually not really mean to do anything other than get PR for it. So
I just wanted to read the comment because I will read criticisms and we will air them. Tell us how you really feel. And I think that's not very fascist of me, but to a T almost, people who use the word fascism tend to not have any idea what the term actually means. It's very bizarre. Let's see. Doomsday Clock Radio said the downside of school choice is that it could result in even more divisiveness and polarization within the communities, but I guess we'll see how it goes. We don't learn anything without taking some risk. Now, I like that thought. We don't learn anything without taking some risk. I think that's true. We know what's not working, and so we should be trying new things that could work and experimenting. That is how we were meant to operate as a country. And that's one of the beautiful things of federalism, is the ability to kind of experiment from state to state and for other states to notice how other states are doing and implement things that work and not try things that don't end up working. But when it comes to school choice being divisive, I just don't see how. You're basically just giving people their tax dollars back and allowing them to allocate them to the place where they best want to use them. That's kind of like saying, if you're on food stamps and you're allowed to buy groceries from any grocery store versus just being able to go to Walmart, it's going to be divisive.
I mean,
I think it could actually reduce divisiveness because we've had these
Exactly.
culture wars over what's going on in schools. And the reason people feel so passionately about them is because their kids are stuck in that school. If every parent could choose the school that's right for them, I don't think people would care so much about what's happening in certain schools because only the
Right.
parents that are okay with it would put their kids in those schools. So I actually think it could help reduce divisiveness.
I've never seen an instance where having less government increases divisiveness. I just think the more freedom you give people, the more choice they have, the less polarization, the less divisiveness there is. So, but I guess we'll see. We now have several states of universal school choice, which is great. That's a pretty new development in the past 2 years that we've seen those bills start passing at that level. So we're going to soon have some really good data out of places like Florida and Arizona that we can, look at, and the rest of the country can start taking note. Oh, BS, who, of course, lacks a profile picture, said, Hannah's had facial plastic surgery. Kind of young for that. I have not had facial plastic surgery. I would down the road because screw some aging. But, why are men like this? And I do know it's a man because of course it is. But no, really, actually, I saw somebody on Twitter over the weekend that was saying, men, can you tell when women have had Botox or fillers and all these? And they were like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Definitely can. They absolutely can't. I've experimented on this. I had my mom get some and we didn't tell my dad for a month because he claims he hates it. And I was like, he'll never notice. He'll never notice. And sure enough, we eventually just had to tell him because he never noticed. I've done it with my brother and his wife. I myself have done it with my boyfriend. You tend to notice when I get new filler, Brad, because you'll be like, oh my God, you look so good. But you're the only man in my life that actually picks up on it.
And I'm
So
gay. So
you're gay. But it's weird to me that one, men think they hate it so much and no, you don't. Most of the most beautiful people have it and you would die to go on a date with them. It's just you want to be mean to pretty people that you can't get. So you try to use this as a knock. I don't really get it. It's weird.
It's also just a weird obsession with women's appearance.
Very much so.
Yeah, you get way more comments on your appearance than I do.
Yeah, and it's weird because again, these people never have their faces out there, which I think speaks volumes. But secondarily, I'm pretty, so I don't understand what you think you're gonna do. You think you're gonna convince me I'm ugly, and then I'll go on a date with you? What's the end game here? I'd really like to know because you haven't thought it through. Again, let's bring logic back to public schools because a lot of you are really lacking.
All right, Plasma says, I'm getting sick of literal communists. Donald should have used the Commie Control Act to get rid of the Democrat traitors. No.
What was the Commie Control Act?
I don't know, but it doesn't sound very pro free speech to me.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like gulags or something. I'm a little scared. All right, well, on to hot takes. Brad, I don't know if you've thought about this. I've thought about it a good bit. What would be the one item that you'd absolutely have to have if you were stuck on a desert island? And I'm saying stuck for let's say 2 to 3 days. So food and water are out. You can have your basic needs met, but you can't live without for a few days.
Reggie.
Oh, that's really sweet. But Phoenix would hate a desert island because it'd be too hot. So I'm not going to say that. I know exactly what I would need, and it is Q-tips. I would lose my mind if I didn't have a Q-tip for 24 hours. I don't know how people have water in their ears and live like that. I have to obsessively clean my ears. I might need to get treatment for it. I don't know. But I can't, the idea of not being able to clean your ear with a Q-tip gives me hives and oh my God. So Q-tips are a vital requirement for me at all times. And I don't know how people live without them. And I don't know what people did before they were invented. I don't want to know because it sounds like just, a third world.
Yeah, it's basically third world conditions to not have Q-tips.
They probably don't have Q-tips, do they?
I don't really use Q-tips. I don't think you're supposed to.
You don't clean your ears?
I'll clean them with a towel.
No, immediately out of the shower. First thing I do out of the shower is grab Q-tips.
I think doctors say you're not supposed to do that. It's bad for your ears.
I don't care. I don't care. No, I have to have them. Also, I don't think men deal with this quite as much, but often women lose eyelashes and they get stuck in our eyes and it's one of the most painful experiences in the world. And the best way to get them out is a Q-tip. And so for that reason, God, I just couldn't survive without Q-tips. And nobody paid me to say this. But Q-tip, if you want to sponsor me, I'd be great.
My hot take is that brownies are superior to cookies as a baked dessert.
I don't think that's that controversial. I'd mostly.
People sleep on brownies.
I I don't think Americans sleep on brownies. I think they eat a lot of brownies and cookies and donuts and baked goods in general.
Yeah, but I don't know. I feel like brownies are not served as nearly as often, but they're almost always better than cookies.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I'm
And
doing this diet right
they're
now.
actually even easier to make.
Very easy to make. And they also can just be like muffins. They're kind of versatile. Like you can do a lot with a brownie mix. I'm doing this diet right now that my mom lost 60 pounds on last year and also like reversed every medical condition she'd had. She went off every medication she was on. Like, and then I've had a bunch of family members lose a lot of weight on it too. So like I'm doing this diet right now and it's really easy to follow. You eat like 5 of their meals a day, like, and they're small, sort of like prepackaged things. You eat every 2.5 hours. And then you eat one big, like, lean and green, like meat and 3 basic kind of dinner in the evenings. But the problem I have with the diet is not that I'm ever hungry and it's not that the food's bad. It's that a lot of the food is stuff like that. It's like brownies, it's like mashed potatoes, it's cookies, it's pancakes. And I told my mom, I was like, I just like don't eat that richly in my normal diet. So like I don't want to eat a brownie every day. Like it's too much sweet stuff for me. But the reason so many other people find success on this diet is because Americans do eat like that every day. So they're like doing this diet and still getting to eat brownies and cookies and all of that. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, but I actually just want like real food. Like, that doesn't sound that good to me.
Well,
Anyway.
it sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, all right, guys, let us know your hot takes in the comments. Hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll read reviews and comments next week as always. And until then, stay based.